I'm going to turn it over to you, Tina, to introduce yourself and take it away.
Thank you so much, Michael. And so sorry, I don't have a tree in my background, but I'm a little late to that game.
No, we can't all be Liam.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping to offer some Zen. So.
And I'm in a very modest hotel room in Hawaii, so I couldn't stage a better background here either.
In Hawaii, though, nonetheless.
In Hawaii, though, exactly.
Evan, thank you so much for joining. As Michael said, I'm SVP of Strategic Partnerships and Growth here at MediaMonks. I'm so happy that you and I get a chance to chat again. I'd love it if we start off, maybe everyone possibly doesn't know so much about your background. So maybe talking a little about your journey and the time you spent at Hurley and how that helped shape your now amazing role at Billabong. Let's just dig in.
Yeah, just a quick recap of my career. I actually fell in love with surfing first at a very young age, and sort of most decisions I made in life were, especially career-wise, were around trying to figure out how I could stay connected to the sport in some way. So through my high school years, I was highly competitive and competed in a lot of national events and that kind of thing. And when it came time to graduate from high school, I realized that I wasn't Kelly Slater. I was actually Evan Slater. So I didn't go on tour. I went to college instead, and just figured out a path to marry my passion with my work. And it really came down to a love for writing, a love for curiosity about how people work together, and it sort of molded into this role where I initially started in surf media at Surfer Magazine in the late 90s, and was basically a part of the surf media for the better part of a decade. That skill set was transitioned over to the brand side. I ended up making a move in 2009 to Hurley, and I really found over time and now more than ever, having that sort of editor's mindset, that journalistic mindset, is really effective in brand marketing today.
I love that you said that. That's good.
And then just quickly, so I was at Hurley for 10 years, pretty closely connected with Nike, which was our parent company. So learned a lot under them. And then 2 years ago, I made the transition over to Billabong with a similar role, but different brand in our space, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Knowing that you have sort of that editorial mindset, obviously that experience, how has that sort of helped shape product and, dare I say, product storytelling, which a lot of brands sort of either fear doing or feel that storytelling and product land doesn't really exist or need to exist? What's your positioning there?
Well, I one thing is, as a marketer, and joining a brand that you believe in is probably like number one, especially with that journalistic instinct. I have trouble marketing things that I don't believe in. But that being said, it really is important to kind of look at what the end result will be of marketing a product, and how not only consumers are going to react, but media, because that's the ultimate BS detector, right? Is how media respond to things, especially if it's just organic and you're not paying them to say great things about you. So at the end of the day, I'm always going, okay, what are the cynical journalists that I used to be? What are they going to say about these product stories that we're making? And it tends to work out pretty well, especially when you're working hand in hand with the product team from the very beginning on developing these stories, and not just sort of taking what they created in a vacuum and trying to market it.
It's interesting. I always think of Billabong as sort of a legacy brand, but it's a brand that has always remained relevant and has continued to sort of, dare I say, even drive trends in the space, especially with the surfer community. I would love to know, how do you stay relevant? How do you stay relevant in such a time, and really don't help to segment your audience? How are you continuing to gain reach?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it really starts with the the mission statement of the brand, and it's been this since as long as I think anybody who works there can remember, that the goal of Billabong is to inspire youth through progressive surf culture. So what that means is we want to be very sharp on surf culture and driving that forward, but the hope is that it's so appealing and so amazing and inspirational that it reaches out to a broader youth culture. And really, we emphasize the youth because our founder is 100% about looking forward and not about looking back. The second we propose any kind of nostalgic retro kind of thing, he'd be the first one to call us out and tell us, use your legacy to your advantage, but don't be defined by it. And I think that's how we're effective with being a legacy brand, but not resting on those laurels, and actually using it as part of the arsenal of our storytelling, but not leading with it. That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that your motto is know the feeling, and some of your campaign taglines, like living life in board shorts, it sort of all resonates and ladders up to that umbrella story. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the most famous taglines and probably in the surf industry of all time was the one that our founder came up with back in I think it's the 80s. And it was, only a surfer knows the feeling, which today, if you think about it through the lens of just, modern times, it's a little bit exclusive. So at a certain point, we kind of broaden that to just know the feeling. So our vision for the brand is just to help create a world where everyone knows this magic feeling of riding a wave, whether it be metaphorical or actual physical. And so that has been something that just is our North Star in everything we say, make, and do. And feel like it's pretty effective because we have that very sharp point of view that we try to stay true to, but also knowing that, hey, this is a lifestyle, this is an industry for everybody, and how can we diversify our storytelling to make everybody feel included? Because surfing is a magic sport, and we try to provide products to help make it even more magic.
Dare I say, I've never surfed because I fear the enormous waves. What would you tell someone who's a little fearful, but wants to explore that sense of freedom?
Yeah. And I will say, we're not just about, like, if you don't want to go surfing, you're not a part of the brand, but it's just more being that ocean inspired, consumer that the carefree lifestyle of the surf world is kind of what we're trying to capture. But as far as like the actual, hey, how do you go and learn to surf or access that? There's more and more touch points and places that any non-surfer can go that would get an experience that would last a lifetime for them, through like lessons in different places there's wave pools sprouting up everywhere now. So it's pretty exciting to see how many surfers are on the planet now, and it continues to grow.
Super fair. And Hawaii has some of the best surfers in the world and surfing in the world, right? So you're positioned currently accordingly.
Yes.
That said, I'd love to sort of pivot a little bit.
Sure.
Knowing that we're currently in a time of COVID, and for most, the first pandemic that we've ever experienced, how would you say that's affected some of your current e-commerce marketing and just traction?
Yeah, I think the COVID situation, more than anything, just accelerated a lot of what we were already doing, in that we were leading with our digital storytelling. We were, and basically an entire channel, which is our wholesale and even our physical retail channels, were shut down for an extended period. So what does that mean? Well, more than ever, this whole, like I said, this editorial mindset around how can we communicate and connect with our consumer in a brand right way every single day while still, driving e-commerce goals, became the task. And so it really was mapping out, the upcoming months in a way that has, like, the bigger story that we're trying to capture for an extended period of time, but then how does that click down each and every day around our key products for those different seasons. While at the same time being aware of all the other challenges that brands face during this time, almost thinking like an editor as well, like, from the social the social demonstrations during the summer to all the COVID stuff, like the list goes on. And, as a brand, never before have the spotlight been turned back on the brand, and consumers asking, how are you going to respond to this?
Yeah. How are you going to show up? Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So I'd say we just doubled down on what kind of we're already doing. And I think on the back end of this, it's made us even stronger going into 2021 as hopefully things start to open back up and, go back to normalcy, that we continue a lot of the practices that we developed, over this time.
Have there been any surprises, Evan, during this time of our, quote unquote new normal? Any current trends that surprises you?
I would just say it's interesting because, instinctually you're going to say, okay, everybody's going to shut down, and video games are going to go, off the charts, and, people are just going to continue to buy like sweats and all that. But what you saw this year was a certain level of fatigue in that, obviously, with people being locked down for so long.
Absolutely.
So in our space, we saw a crazy amount of hard goods being sold, more than ever before. And what I say is hard goods is surfboards and bodyboards and all the equipment that you use to ride waves, has just gone through the roof. You can't, like, a lot of these certain companies just can't keep them in stock. And I think that's because, well, hey, obviously there's certain levels of people not working, and then also just this fatigue of just being stuck inside. People want to go outside and experience real things. And so, naturally, what the products that we make are, wetsuits and board shorts and apparel to support the surf lifestyle. So we also saw that just particularly wetsuits go through the roof, through this COVID period, direct through e-commerce.
Well, people tend to have a little bit more time, right? But they also need a little bit of, I don't know, cognitive relaxation or reset, right? So that may be where the water comes into play. So that's really good to hear. Knowing that obviously conversion isn't everything, and it's very powerful what you said. There's an element of storytelling and personalization and really meeting the consumer where they are at the right moment, at the right time, with the right message. That said, are there any maybe shopping experiences that Billabong provides that you would love to push a little further? Or are there any brands that are doing it well that inspire you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because since I've, going back even to my days at Hurley, we're still trying to figure out the loyalty model that really resonates with consumers and is super powerful. You look at some of these like omnipresent brands that, consumers use every single day, like Starbucks or Visa or Shell Oil or whatever. Like their loyalty programs are pretty sophisticated when you think about it. Whereas apparel brands generally are pretty far behind, barring some of the more recently sprouted up DTC brands. And so that's a number one priority for us because we have such a massive or significant physical retail footprint, along with there's a growing digital, like a percentage of our digital business being part of the broader business, that we just see, a crazy opportunity and us being able to create it exists currently, but it's just, we want to keep doubling down on that and creating a better experience for anybody who walks into a Billabong store, anybody who goes to billabong.com. They are treated as a crew member, and really feel the benefits of that. And it's consistent across all channels.
That's important and key for sure. Knowing that you are a significant retail establishment as well as online presence, and you've actually rooted a huge footprint in the market, that market is such a crowded space. Talk to me a little bit about how you differentiate yourselves in the category. What's unique?
Yeah, it's funny because in any industry, the objective consumer can look at it and go, oh, it's all the same, right? But obviously when you're within an industry, you're going to be like, no, this is why we're the leader of the pack and why we differentiate ourselves from everybody else. So I'm very mindful of that. I'd say if I'm thinking about Billabong and those key differentiators, a couple of things. One is authenticity. So our founder is, founded the brand in 1973. While he's not working day to day, he's probably our loudest critic, but also advocate, right? So,
they usually are.
Yes, and so he's very involved, and we can always kind of revert back to Gordon and what would Gordon say or whatever if we feel like we're like kind of drifting, right? So that's one. Second is every function within this brand is very tightly knit. That's across sales, marketing, and the product engine. And so we think about strategy and long-term like brand health. So we're very passionate about the quality of the brand for the long term, and we've seen the pitfalls of other brands in our space, either over distributing or discounting too much and that kind of thing. And so we're I think strategically we're very just very on point and on top of that part, because you got to look at the long term, and you can't just try to meet. Obviously, we have the luxury of not being publicly owned, but not having to meet numbers by quarter is a huge advantage for us.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing is consistency. So while we are always about like adding new progressive surf culture to the world and great product stories and all that, and continuing to drive everything forward, the brand's had quite a few regime changes over the last 2 decades. But there have been a few core teammates there who have sort of held the brand DNA there and the values of the brand intact. And so as different members come in, they're very great about just keeping us pointed toward the right North Star. And that being said, the team that we have now is again one of the most collaborative, probably the most collaborative team I've ever worked with across all functions, which is great, like the best. I'm having the best work life of my life right now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And not many can say that at this time. So I think that's super powerful. Dare I ask you, do you have any work that you'd like to share that's been most inspiring or that's been just the most challenging?
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to this like editor's mindset thing, and I think particularly brands in our space, apparel brands, aside from some of those sport-driven brands, I think Nike's the best at doing this. But again, anticipating moments and being ready to respond and serve the consumer in a powerful way. I did have an example with just a few slides, and I can go through them quickly. Just about and I'll give some context, but it was a world title / world champ moment for the brand with one of our athletes at an event that we sponsored in Hawaii, which was actually 2019, the exact same time last year. So I'm over here for the same event. But I can talk through that and just give just a quick overview of how we executed on this plan that wasn't guaranteed, right? It was just a scenario that we had to be prepared for.
Awesome. Let me see if I can share some work. 1 second. Oh, it seems to not be allowing me to share.
Okay. That's fine.
But it was beautiful. Problem. A few slides.
All good.
Maybe we can talk a little bit narratively around.
Yeah, I thought a couple visuals would have helped, but all good. So we have a Brazilian surfer, and his name is Italo Ferreira, and he kind of came out of nowhere, and suddenly toward the end of 2019, he was in a really good spot to potentially win the world title, which in surfing is a big deal. It's like the thing, and if your brand is associated with that world champion, it's I think you have it there. Oh. This was just like from a quick a few slides from a recap deck, but so if you go to the next slide. Okay. So yeah, basically, obviously, going into an event, we invest a pretty good amount of money to be a title sponsor of what is this. It's called the Billabong Pipe Masters in Hawaii. It's sort of the Super Bowl of surfing. Traditionally, it's the end event of the tour in any given year, and it's where world champions are decided. So, we knew that our guy Italo had a chance to win the world title going into the last event. So we just needed to prepare for that. So basically, we created a whole marketing campaign on the beach where we put the entire beach, which has about 25,000 spectators, wearing these tie-dye green and yellow shirts. We kind of created a more of a people's champ kind of personality around him. One of the the idiosyncrasies of Brazilian world tour surfers is, instead of saying stoked, which is a surf word that you've heard, they say stoke it. And so, we got Italo's approval, and we did this whole stoke it campaign, and people just loved it. And so basically they were watching as Italo went, through the journey of getting to the finals in the event and going up against the guy that, was his rival, and he was the world title depended on this last final and who won. He ended up winning. We made sure that the celebration was seen on this webcast, which has about 6 million people watching on the beach. And then from there, you could go to the next slide. And so this is right at the moment, like you see the beach like littered in flags and wearing these shirts. And so this is on the webcast, and all kinds of people were cheering. And then go to the next slide. So within 10 minutes, we had a whole digital campaign around Italo's surfing, and this was all of our athletes participating, men and women, just talking about who this guy was and what words came to mind when he's on a wave, and this had a huge amount of engagement. And we also posted in real time the actual moment when he came to the beach and went crazy. So a bunch of digital content that we pushed out right as the event happened. And then, so that's 10 minutes in, and then you go to the next. So, and within 2 hours, we had the actual world champ. So we didn't print the world champ part. We just had, the Italo face and his name with Billabong, but we had all these other shirts ready to go that said world champ on it. We put these on Billabong.com in under 2 hours around the world in all of our key markets. And the sales went through, again, just like, I think it sold through like 273% or something. It's not crazy numbers because it's just a t-shirt, right? But it did remarkably well. In my experience of selling world champ gear, I've never seen the kind of engagement and conversion around title memorabilia and surfing. So it felt really good to just hit all the points and really think through the journey from start to finish, and just be ready to pull the trigger, knowing that, hey, it might not even happen, right? And that's how editors have to think. They always have to think of all the different scenarios and how they're going to respond with their storylines and their headlines.
That's super fair, and thank goodness he won.
Thank goodness he won. It was kind of a fairy tale ending, and we had, obviously backup plans if he didn't win, but it was nice to see it all play out like we had hoped it. Better than scripted, actually.
And Evan, when you're sort of thinking about this, I'll call it econometric model, if you will, are you also thinking about outside of just websites and your e-commerce platforms? You're obviously also selling on Amazon properties and that sort. Are you thinking about the full connected experience? So how this shows up on social, how does it show up within, CRM or banner units, et cetera?
Yeah. So one of the advantages within our brand is that we are very brand led. So any communication that goes out, regardless of the touch point, does have to go through brand, and we have to help guide that. It gets trickier and trickier as you see these just these data sets that come back and say, hey, we're selling underwear really well. Can we do an underwear campaign? And we're like, no, that doesn't make sense. But maybe we can, when we come up with an alternative to drive more commerce around something that's not necessarily brand led, right?
Sure.
So I think it's really important now more than ever for the brand to think about every single touch point and being consistent across all of those. Now, where you do lose some of that control is those broader digital e-commerce channels like Amazon, but we work very hard to try to keep it as consistent as possible.
Yes, it looks very uniformed, if you will.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. I think we can stop the share of the work.
Okay, good.
My next question would be thinking about inspiring folks through that customer decision journey, if you will, on to purchase or not. Something other brands do is they think about that full journey and think about, like, folks want to know, especially the younger generation now, how are the things made? Where is it made? Sustainability. What cultural presence is bringing that brand bringing forward? Aftercare, current care. Tell me a little bit about that thinking and how that comes to life at Billabong.
Yeah, I mean, we with ecom we have a pretty extensive team who just lives and breathes the data, right, and tries to think about a better customer experience. When it comes to communication and how we're offering up these services, it always goes back to the brand, right? So, and it's which is awesome that we have that partnership, because how we always look, the lens that we look at through everything that we do is through this target 19-year-old consumer. Call him Jimmy, and everybody knows within our brand who Jimmy is. And if Jimmy's not, if he sees something that is, doesn't feel like his brand from Billabong, we've failed. And so we continue to ask, what would Jimmy say about that or this or that? And it's a pretty fun exercise, because we have this consensus on who Jimmy is. And there's going to be regions that try to broaden the definition of Jimmy, but we always try to keep it as tight as possible, if that makes sense.
Yes, that definitely makes sense. What advice, Evan, you have such a breadth of experience. What advice, if any, would you give current marketers sitting in your footsteps, if you will, or even future marketers that are thinking about entering the product world?
Yeah, I think it's easy for marketers to get caught up in tools that are like these magic tools to, convert customers or, gain more, bigger audience. And there's also best practices that have to follow. But all that stuff, regardless of what time, that the new platform of the day is around, I'd say an amazing story timed right will always win. So always have to go back to that, and you can convince yourself that something is like that your brand is getting behind is the next best thing. But you always have to kind of look at it with a little bit of a cynical eye, and always try to understand like how the customer is going to respond, how the media is going to respond as objectively as possible.
Absolutely. And I think everyone is so keen to talk about data-driven theories and data-driven product and service placement, but people sort of forget we're marketing to humans. There's a human-to-human element. So the fact that you're still using that data, but then applying it in a very connected, very human experience way, and you are always thinking about how you want that human to talk about your brand and what behavior you want them to execute or manifest. I think that sort of also separates you and differentiates you as a brand. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say one more thing too, is advice is it's more important than ever for brands to work like a living, breathing organism across all functions, right? We are, brands are these things, right? And they're not conveyor belts where they just sort of like, get stamped along the way and everybody does their little piece to it. So working in silos more than ever just doesn't work. As a marketer, you should make sure that you care about all aspects of the business and try to work with all the functions to make the brand better and more emotionally connected to the consumer.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've worked at many agencies, and one of the sort of challenges I always found was that strategy as a function or discipline was always a standalone unit, and then you bring creative into the fold. And I always love one of the things we do at MediaMonks so well is strategy, creative, and user experiences all started as a function together as a very agile, lean team, because then that's how you get the best product storytelling, right? And you have your anchors, your KPIs. Super powerful.
Exactly. Yeah, like again, like just like you said, my hackles go up a little bit when somebody will be like, "So what's the creative?" Like, no, what's the story? That's where you start, and then it all comes to life.
Yes.
You know, so
Agreed.
yes.
I have one last question for you, and then there's been a few questions coming in, so we'll go over to that. But one question I love to end on is essentially, I believe that everyone has a brand. You have a personal brand, then you have a brand that you sort of build together while through your working through your career journey, et cetera. That said, what would you want your legacy to be?
You know, like I said at the beginning, this all started with falling in love with the sport of surfing. So I've always felt like in some shape or form, I'm a caretaker of the sport and culture. Whether I'm selling board shorts or as an editor or whatever it might be. So hopefully my legacy is that I was passionate about the sport, about the culture, and that I left it in a better place than I found it. That is if I ever leave it, which I don't think I will until I'm not around anymore.
That's awesome. Oh, Michael V. Hello. Yes, we did work together at McGarry Bowen. Thanks for tuning in. Michael would love to know, he loves your tagline, by the way.
Cool.
He has a question around, will Billabong and their plans be environmentally focused as surfer numbers are growing astronomically? What are your plans in the sort of sustainability community?
It's a huge priority for us, and it really starts with the products that we make and making those more and more sustainable and just environmentally conscious. So we have actually over the years have gotten to a point that where all of our board shorts are made from recycled plastics, every single one. We make all of our wetsuits are now made with recycled materials. And each and every year we continue to try to ramp that up to just lighten the footprint of our products through recycled materials and also just sustainable materials. We just launched a wetsuit in November. We called the Natural, that actually has this enzyme called cyclo in it, which degrades the wetsuit almost like biodegrades, so that it's not, there's no like plastic particles left as the final end product. So it's clearly our product teams are passionate about finding better solutions around more environmental products.
That's awesome. Another question is, someone's asking, would there ever be a place for AR and Billabong? Do you think that we can partner together and draw greater experiences through the world and lens of AR?
Yeah. It's funny. I've dabbled with the concept a number of times because I think there's massive potential there. Definitely not closed-minded to it, because I think, you know, when you go back to this idea of a world where everyone knows the feeling, AR is a great way to achieve that. So figuring out the right plan around that is certainly something we're open to.
Awesome. In the philanthropic space, Billabong has been a huge, again, community activist and very much focused on the humane aspect and bringing people together. Is there anything future that you can talk about? Anything coming up?
You know, we try to we have a motto that's protect the places we play, and so we look for the like-minded partners that that we can help support to make our oceans cleaner, and then more recently to make a broader, diverse culture. Right. So as we've seen the events of 2020, it's really forced us to look in the mirror and go, what are we really doing everything we can to create a more diverse surfing culture? So we've been partnering up with a few mentoring organizations that take kids surfing have like surf that are connected with the school systems and surf PE classes, and then they, inner city kids, and it's been a lot of fun just kind of trying to broaden our aperture and how we can give back. But there's the environmental front, and then there's also the diversity and inclusion front, which we're putting a lot of time into and resources.
Awesome. And obviously it sounds like one of my famous hashtags are hashtag pay it forward. So it sounds like Billabong is huge on the pay it forward aspect. So that's really positive to hear. 2 more questions, Evan. Thank you so much for hanging in there.
Sure.
How are you determining where to spend time on emerging technologies?
I tend, so just through experience, I haven't, like, I would say our marketing budgets don't allow us to take a lot of crazy bets, but we're very mindful of like where consumers are and how we can better serve them. So it's I would say a cautious but open-minded approach to putting resources into new technology.
Super fair. And I'm sure fiscally responsible. So that makes sense. Last question would be, what innovations and technologies are you utilizing to execute your current strategies? And has that changed since the pandemic began?
No, it hasn't changed since the pandemic began. I'd say we have like social media manager platforms that we use. We have our e-com insight platforms that are all used. I don't necessarily want to say which ones we're using because I don't want to get in that world, but
Sure.
It's definitely most of our insights are coming back from the digital function within our organization.
Any predictions, Evan? Any predictions on the future of e-commerce, the future of how folks are consuming content, and really how are we affecting their purchase path?
Yeah, I just think there's so much out there that there's going to be, I think, a stronger filter on what's relevant and what's not. And it's just being mindful of like not overwhelming consumers with just stuff and trying to have a consistent message, but also do it in a way that you're not going to say anything unless you think it's really going to connect with somebody or help them, right? You're not just trying to push stuff on them. And so I think there's definitely going to be more mindfulness, at least on our side, about that as we go, and just even doubling down on just brand leading with brand, obviously through digital.
Well said. I see our lovely host is back, Michael.
I'm here.
So,
guys, that was absolutely amazing. Evan, Tina, thank you. And Evan, I had a quick question. I don't know if the connection's breaking up, but the last time I was on Brand Innovators, I was a moderator with marketing for Taco Bell. And she talked about how a lot of the times she'll just produce cool stuff and there is no KPIs attached to it. It's just for brand building. And there's no thought of like everywhere commerce. We don't want to sell. We just want to delight. Philosophically, how do you balance that as a marketer between having to sell stuff and then just making really cool stuff with no agenda?
Yeah, it's funny. I think there is a way to achieve, both that and commerce at the same time, more and more, especially if you're very closely connected to the product team from start to finish. But we certainly think about those surprise and delight moments, particularly around places where our consumers are, or events that are very endemic but large to our space. I can think back to what's called the U.S. Open of Surfing in Huntington Beach a couple of years, or I think it was last summer or 2019, where this is an event that has like 100,000 people on the beach. Wasn't our event, we didn't sponsor it, but as like a bit of a guerrilla marketing type of exercise, we would go down and airdrop photos that said, "Come and create your custom board short" across the street at the Billabong shop. And when they would come over, we had one of our top team writers there. So it's like, imagine having LeBron James, maybe not LeBron James, but somebody of that like stature within the surf world, waiting for that kid to come and design his own custom board shorts and give a high five to one of our guys. And stuff like that is a lot of fun. And I would say that's the kind of brand building we do. It's like still connected to commerce in some way. Like he went through the customization experience, but we connected him to the brand and to one of our team writers, which, is something that kid will never forget.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Evan, thank you. Tina, as always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
To everybody watching, if you liked what Tina and I talked about or what Evan talked about, please connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to continue the conversation. I do want to wish everyone a wonderful holiday season that we're entering into, and I want